Welcome back to our channel. A kid stuck in hell was screaming behind that well-known house by itself. Macaulay Culkin was worth $50 million at the age of 10, but he was unaware of it. That's what his father ensured. The terrible reality is revealed today. Through threats, abuse, and a perverted motivation, Kit Culkin made his own son a prisoner of fame. This isn't your typical kid star tale. This father's betrayal will leave you stunned. The birth date of Macaulay Culkin is August 26, 1980. New York City's Manhattan. His home was little, his family was large, and money was never plentiful. In Yorkville, he grew up with 6 siblings in a little apartment so small that they had to share a room with bunk beds. They lived in a small hallway with no doors separating them. There was no privacy, but they were close because of the chaos. Kit Culkin, his father, had worked as a theatrical performer before accepting a position at a nearby church. Patricia Brentraw, his mother, was an agency employee. Everything for Macaulay would alter as a result of that relationship to the entertainment industry. Life was difficult. Macaulay subsequently revealed that he used to scuttle behind theater seats in search of misplaced change. His family's struggles were evident in this modest but telling sign, but there was more going on in that packed apartment. His father saw an opportunity to pursue his goal of becoming an actor for his children. Kit encouraged them to pursue careers in show business, thinking that one of them was already acting in off-Broadway musicals such as Bach Babies and The Nutcracker with the New York City Ballet before he turned 5. His mother's employment also helped. Because of her contacts at casting agencies, one director, Billy Hopkins, even covered Macaulay's transportation costs to the auditions. By the age of 8, he had secured minor parts in See You in the Morning and Rocket Gibraltar. But when he and John Candy co-starred in Uncle Buck in 1989, everything changed. The program. It was impossible to ignore him because of his charm, timing, and facial gestures. He was something unique, not simply another little actor. After playing Kevin McAllister in Home Alone, Macaulay Culkin's life was irrevocably altered. He was only a youngster trying out for a movie. In the world, he was the most well-known kid actor. The film, which was written by John Hughes and directed by Chris Columbus, portrayed the tale of a youngster who had to outsmart 2 robbers after getting left behind on Christmas. It had just the right amount of passion, humor, and wit. But without the ideal Kevin, it would have all failed. Columbus first considered Culkin for the part, but the director wasn't convinced. He auditioned more than 200 more kids and kept searching. Their inherent charm was not the same. Culkin remembered 2 full scenes from the screenplay when he returned for a second tryout. He did more than recite the lines. His name was Kevin. It was that. The quest was finished. When Home Alone first appeared in theaters in 1990, it quickly gained popularity. Audiences were captivated by Kevin's outrageous stunts and amusing songs. In the United States alone, the movie earned almost $285 million, shattering previous records and making Culkin a worldwide celebrity. His image appeared on lunchboxes, publications, and posters. Pop culture embraced this mindset. Culkin's performance was a major factor in the film's success. He transformed Kevin into more than a naughty youngster. He gave him humor, bravery, and total relatability. He was adored by audiences and critics. Hollywood took note as well. All of the big studios now wanted to cast him in their next blockbusters. New York lost Home Alone 2 years later. Enter theaters. Once more, Kevin found himself cut off from his family, but this time, the entire city of New York served as his playground. Along with even more spectacular stunts, the movie retained everything that made the first one so fantastic. Funny times. Even though its earnings were lower than those of the original, it was nevertheless a huge smash, grossing over $173 million in the United States alone. For Culkin, the follow-up was more than just another popular film. It was a financial innovation. For the first Home Alone, he received a substantial salary for a kid actor, but for the second, he received an astounding $4.5 million. By 1994, when he starred in Richie Rich, he was earning $15 million. Per video. He was one of Hollywood's top-paid performers at the age of 14. However, there was pressure to be famous. His career was overseen by his father, Kit Culkin, who also advocated for higher wages. Behind the scenes, however, things weren't simple. In the mid-1990s, Macaulay stepped away from acting. He'd earned enough to last a lifetime, and the attention had begun to get to him. After he departed Hollywood, Home Alone continued to be popular. Families worldwide watched every December. To outwit the intruders and protect his home, holiday viewing of the movie became customary. It was shown to their own children by youngsters who grew up watching it. It was a part of people's childhoods, not just a film. Home Alone is one of the most cherished movies ever made, even after several decades. The clever traps is a late-night comedy, and the endearing tale all contributed to its popularity. Macaulay Culkin was at the center of it all, though. He wasn't just a character, he was Kevin McAllister. And that young child with the broad smile will never stop reminding viewers of the wonder of Christmas, no matter how many years go by. Early in the 1990s, Macaulay Culkin was well known, but as he got older, things began to shift. His aim was to demonstrate that he was more than simply the naughty child from Home Alone. There was more he desired. He took on a part in 1991 that was entirely different from anything he had ever done. Neither an adventure movie nor a slapstick comedy was My Girl. It was heartfelt. Tragically, it was. As Thomas J. Culkin portrayed a kind and delicate youngster who was allergic to nearly everything. It was a sincere performance. With almost $17 million made in the US, the movie was a hit. It wasn't your typical hit, though. It was a pivotal moment when people began to perceive him as more than just a humorous youngster. Next followed the astonishing film The Good Son in 1993. He transformed into Henry Evans, a child without a conscience or regret, rather than portraying a charming miscreant. The Macaulay Culkin that people knew was not this one. Something gloomier, something unsettling. His performance caused discomfort because of his icy gaze and unnerving composure. Culkin's range was undeniable, regardless of one's thoughts about the movie. He didn't hesitate to take chances. Kit Culkin, his father, had campaigned for the position, even threatening to have him removed from Lost in New York and Home Alone 2 if he didn't get it. It was a daring move that paid off. The enthusiasm surrounding Culkin was waning by 1994, even if he was still earning big jobs. In Richie Rich, he played the lead, portraying a kid who is a billionaire and has a golden heart. With a popular character, an entertaining premise, and Culkin's trademark charisma, the film had it all. But there was a gap. The enchantment was absent. The reviews were indifferent. Additionally, although the film earned well at the box office, it lacked the intensity of his previous hits. It was obvious that viewers were beginning to move on. The mid-1990s was an odd period for family movies. People continued to adore them. They desired more nuance and subtlety. Culkin was having a hard time. Although he was still quite young, he had changed from the wide-eyed child from Home Alone. As he matured, Hollywood was unsure of how to handle him. Have an effect. While they weren't total flops, they weren't the huge successes that everyone had anticipated. The world's biggest kid star was now less untouchable. Then, when he was only 14, he accomplished something that nobody anticipated. He left. He earned $8 million for each movie, making him one of the best-paid kid actors ever. But he desired to leave. Since the age of 4, he had been employed. He had never known anything but movies. Make friends, go to school, and be a typical adolescent. In May 2002, Macaulay Culkin and Mila Kunis began dating. Both were up-and-coming celebrities at the time, navigating Hollywood life. Kunis was getting more and more notoriety from that show from the 1970s, and Culkin was still regarded as the Home Alone youngster. They largely maintained their romance covert despite the media's attention. Kunis stated in a 2007 interview that they led a straightforward life together. They read books, played video games, and watched movies. Culkin, she added, was a fantastic chef who prepared dinner every night. However, as the years went by, things became more difficult. Kunis was based in Los Angeles by 2006, while Culkin was residing in New York. They began to tire from the long journey. They made the decision to part ways in early 2011. According to Kunis' publicist at the time, they remained friends and the split was cordial. She claimed in a podcast that she handled the breakup poorly and described her behavior in her 20s as awful. Looking back, she regretted how things turned out, but it gave them both the opportunity to move on. Kunis married Ashton Kutcher in 2015, and Culkin fell in love again with actress Brenda Song. They collaborated on Green's movie Changeland in 2017, but they didn't immediately begin dating. Following the shoot, they became closer, and by October, they were spotted together. They accompanied each other to events and held hands at Knott's Scary Farm. They didn't talk much about their relationship, in contrast to many couples in Hollywood. opting to maintain confidentiality. They welcomed their first child, a son called Dakota, in April 2021. They gave him the name of Culkin's sister, who died in 2008. They had Carson, their second son, in December 2022. They depended on Son's parents to help them instead of hiring a nanny. Culkin referred to himself as a homebody dad because he spent most of his time at home. Son managed to juggle motherhood and her career. Though they never hurried to get married, they became engaged sometime around 2023. They discussed eloping, but ultimately chose to hold off so Son's family could be included. When Culkin was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in December 2023, Son's gold band was spotted by admirers. The couple didn't confirm anything, but some people believe they might have already gotten married. They are still focused on parenting their kids. Culkin has praised singing for years. He once claimed that his belief in her was ingrained in his bones. Grand gestures and public attention are not important to their relationship. Love, trust, and creating a life together are the main themes. One of the most well-known kid stars in Hollywood was Macaulay Culkin. His life was anything from glamorous behind the cameras, though. Kit Culkin, his father, served as more than just his manager. He was in charge of everything. He controlled the finances, made the decisions, and ensured Macaulay never stopped working. The executives in Hollywood couldn't handle him. He postponed movies like The Good Son and The Nutcracker in order to achieve his goals. The fact that his kid had virtually no influence over his own career was unknown. For many years, Macaulay was unaware of his earnings. That's what his father ensured. He had almost $50 million by the time he eventually learned. His parents were engaged in a contentious custody dispute at the time. Kit made sure he never read stories about his accomplishment by hiding newspapers from him. Maintaining control over him was more important than only safeguarding him. Macaulay desired a break from performing. That was not acceptable to his father. Kit had never succeeded in his own attempt to become an actress. Macaulay had already surpassed his father's accomplishments by the time he was 10 years old. Kit looked irritated rather than proud. Things fell apart in 1995. His parents fought in court for custody of their children. It wasn't only about raising them, though. It was about managing Macaulay's wealth and career. The remainder was put in a trust, and his parents had been dividing a 15% commission from his earnings. It prompted an awkward query. Was money or parental rights at issue here? Legal records gave Kip a bad reputation. Macaulay's mother Patricia charged him of excessive drinking, abuse, and even family desertion. Kip refuted everything. She's making it up to win the case, he said. To tell Macaulay the truth, however, a court was not necessary. He said his dad was a jerk. Should he fail to act flawlessly, Kit would threaten to strike him. He was made to sleep on the couch occasionally as a form of punishment. Discipline wasn't the only thing involved. Power was at issue. Even though Macaulay was one of the most well-known children in the world, he had no authority over his own life at home. Finally, at 16, he made up his mind. He stopped letting his parents handle his money. The first actual step was that. Toward reclaiming his life, but it was not without a price. Kit had totally left his children's life by 1997. The man who had once been in charge of everything vanished out of thin air. Despite his father's passing, Macaulay was still subject to the demands of celebrity. He was taken into custody in Oklahoma City in 2004 on charges of possessing prescription medications and marijuana. He was sentenced to 3 one-year suspended prison terms after being briefly imprisoned. The media were having a great time portraying him as just another kid star who had gone crazy. Next came 2012. Speculation about Macaulay's drug addiction was sparked by pictures of him looking weak and unkempt, with some tabloids speculating that he was spending hundreds of dollars a month on heroin. Even a tale about him having nothing to live for was published by the National Enquirer. And was on the verge of death. However, Macaulay retaliated. He said, "No, I was not pounding $6,000 of heroin a month," in an interview with The Guardian, dispelling the claims. The charges weren't what worried him the most. It was the way the media capitalized on his difficulties while acting worried. "No," he said, "you're trying to shift papers, exposing the hypocrisy." In the end, though, Macaulay found serenity. He moved away from Hollywood and established a more sedate life, residing primarily in France. Once defined by fame, he now deliberately avoided it. He said, "I don't just turn my back on fame, I actively don't want it," in response to a question concerning his relationship with the spotlight. In addition, there were long-standing doubts about the friendship between Macaulay Culkin and Michael Jackson. Some people found it strange. Some perceived it as worse. Their connection gained a lot of attention after Jackson was accused. But Culkin never shifted his position, regardless of what the media said. Before Culkin testified in Jackson's 2005 trial, he consistently stood up for Jackson both when he was alive and after he passed away. He took a seat to speak with Larry King. How they met, he explained. When Home Alone was at its height, Jackson had contacted him out of the blue. They had already met briefly during Culkin's time in the Nutcracker. They had never really spoken to each other before. Other folks who met Jackson weren't like Culkin. He was not awed by him. Although he was aware that he was a pop star, he wasn't a huge fan. Maybe that's why they got along, he thought. He did not treat Jackson as a legendary figure. He was like any other individual to him. Either between them both. The whole Culkin family spent time with Jackson and knew him. King inquired about the true events that took place in Neverland. Culkin had a simple response. For amusement, Neverland was created. It featured a whole arcade with video games, a movie theater, and an amusement park. The majority of people, according to Culkin, were unaware of the significance of the fuss surrounding children staying in Jackson's room. Jackson had more than one chamber in his bedroom. With several bathrooms and enough space to feel like an apartment, it was 2 floors tall. Many others had slept there, including Culkin. He was also aware of the reasons why Jackson was misinterpreted. Jackson has lived his entire life in the spotlight. He had spent decades in isolation from the outside world and had never had a typical upbringing. Sometimes things got worse because he was not adept at explaining himself. Culkin had an easy answer for Jackson's preference for children's company when King questioned him about it. Fame didn't matter to kids. He wasn't given any special treatment. He only wanted to play games and hang out. That pleased Jackson, who was a child at heart in many respects. King then posed the most important query. What was Culkin's reaction to the charges he made public? Something about it never made sense to him, but he said it was unfortunate. Why would a parent accept financial compensation rather than see to it that the offending party was sent to prison if the child had actually been harmed? It did not set well with him. He felt that the initial case against Jackson was more about money than it was about the facts. Despite his desire to avoid becoming embroiled in the circus of the media surrounding the trial, he was there for Jackson when he needed him. Culkin's testimony was a significant event. Stated that they witnessed Jackson acting improperly toward him in the early 1990s. Since Culkin wasn't in court that day, a buddy called and instructed him to switch on CNN to get the news. He couldn't believe what was being stated when he heard it. All of it was untrue. He made it apparent to the jury that he had never witnessed Jackson act inappropriately toward anyone. When Leaving Neverland was published years later, everyone eagerly anticipated Culkin's remarks. Was always the case. He spoke out against the charges in a 2020 interview with Esquire. He had no motive to tell lies. He should have made his announcement then, if he had one. However, he did not. He had never been harmed, and he had never witnessed anybody else suffer harm. On a plane, he also shared an odd moment with actor James Franco. Franco, obviously hoping for a response, mentioned the documentary. Culkin turned it off at once. Franco stepped aside as he asked. That was all for that discussion. The actions of Culkin and Chris Tucker throughout the trial were never forgotten by Jackson's attorney, Tom Mesereau. They were both advised to avoid becoming involved. Both disregarded that counsel. Jackson needed them, and they were not going to abandon him, they assured Mesereau. The brother of Macaulay, Kieran Culkin, had always been wary of the press. He had been exposed to erroneous information in newspapers all his life. That was supported by their father, Kit Culkin, who said that visitors of all ages frequented Neverland. Families, celebrities, and politicians came and left. Among many others, former President Ronald Reagan had visited. How could none of these famous people have ever noticed if something evil had been going on? In spite of this, the media continued to promote the notion that Jackson and Culkin had an odd bond. Years later, several articles were still published with no apparent purpose. It was also brought up again using Brenda's song, Culkin's Partner, which wished Paris Jackson a good birthday. The media refused to ignore the friendship, even though those immediately engaged never thought it was out of the ordinary. Macaulay Culkin has no grand Hollywood return in mind. He had no intention of reliving his childhood accomplishments or pursuing celebrity. He returned to acting gradually, taking on minor parts that allowed him to show different sides of himself. He aspired to establish himself as more than the Home Alone kid. By the middle of the 2000s, he began choosing jobs that challenged him. He was able to shed his kid star persona by starring in two lesser-known movies, Sex and Breakfast and The Wrong Guys for the Job. But it was the 2003 film Party Monster that truly made a difference in his life. He portrayed real-life club promoter Macaulay Culkin, who became involved in drug use, criminal activity, and ultimately murder. Anybody who still thought of him as Kevin McAllister would find the role startling. In the late 1980s, the movie delved into the crazy and careless world of New York's underground club scene. It was a powerful and disturbing performance by Culkin. It demonstrated that he had the talent to support his willingness to take chances. He then went on to Saved. 2004, the setting of the dark comedy was a Christian high school. His character, wheelchair-bound and sardonic, Roland Stockard, was able to see through the hypocrisy of his surroundings. Religion, morality, and identity were all sharply and humorously addressed in the film. It was another phase of his metamorphosis, demonstrating his ability to manage challenging and unusual tasks. Culkin was not limited to film. He made an appearance as a guest on Will and Grace. He chooses ventures that pique his interest rather than ones that would bring him back to fame. He was cautious in his approach. He made careful to maintain control and shaped his profession according to his own terms. His performance in American Horror Story, double feature, years later, caused yet another stir. Another gloomy, unsettling figure. Demonstrating that he still has something unique despite the passing of the years. An unforeseen result of that occasion was a 2023 star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It was more than his prior achievements. He received recognition for all of his accomplishments, including the audacious decisions that made him stand out. He wasn't just interested in acting, though. The internet allowed him to freely experiment with the various creative channels that had always captivated him. Bunny Ears is a blend of comedy, satire, and pop culture that is produced through online series and podcasts. After beginning as a podcast, it developed into a whole media endeavor that included a website and YouTube channel. Fake self-help advice and weird product reviews were among the strange and humorous things he filled it with. His goal was not to become a popular performer. He simply enjoyed creating the things that he liked. One of the most bizarre things he ever accomplished was Pizza Underground. He and a few buddies started a parody band in 2012, rewriting Velvet Underground tunes with lyrics about pizza. He was aware of how absurd it was. The band developed an unexpected cult following thanks to songs like Take a Bite of the Wild Slice and All Pizza Parties, which were a combination of humor and homage. They also provided the audience with free pizza during live performances. Some individuals thought it was fantastic. Some didn't. In fact, they were jeered off the stage at one English festival. Culkin was unconcerned. It was never intended for the band to be serious. It was just one more strange and imaginative experiment. The Pizza Underground closed its doors in 2018. It continues to be one of his career's most surprising aspects. He sought ways to express himself outside of performing in music. Outside of Hollywood, he wrote, painted, and experimented with concepts. He had no interest in pursuing fame. He simply did whatever captivated him at the time. In contrast to many former child stars, he made no effort to maintain his early notoriety. He abandoned it and created something new. He was pretty nonchalant about whatever I pursued, Culkin once said. It influenced all he did. He never tried to make a comeback. He was never a conformist. He continued to experiment, create, and enjoy himself.